my gosh, I am seriously so incredibly excited. Okay, so let me just make sure super duper quick that I am live. Just want to make sure that be live. Pulled it on over. Perfect. Okay, I am live. Hello, welcome guys. I am seriously so incredibly excited. Today we're going to be going all about sender scores. Sender scores are some of my favorite things ever because it's really fun, it's super cool, and not only that, but it's also pretty easy to be able to manage, to do things with, and just like all of the good stuff. So I know for me, this is one thing that I have gone through the process of, trying to figure out and trying to debunk and all of that good stuff. So I'm so incredibly excited to be sharing with you guys all of the good stuff. So if you're here, definitely say hello. If you're catching the replay, definitely do #replay. All right, so let's go ahead and dive on in. So the first thing that I want to mention to you guys is I've already gone through the process. I'm pulling over. Here we go. I can see everything now. So basically, just so you know, I've already done a video all about how you can go through the process of pulling your report. So I'm going to be diving in a little bit into the process of after pulling your report through GlockApps. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't pulled my report, actually, I need to see my numbers. In the description of this video, there is a Loom and also a spreadsheet that you're going to need in order to be able to go through that process. So if you haven't already, be sure to sign up for GlockApps. It's a free tool, and it's going to help you guide through the process of what I'm going to be talking about in this live today as well too, as we're going through the process of checking out your sender score, and then also taking a look and seeing if you're on any blacklists and so much more. So everything is already in that video. It's about 10 minutes long. I talk a little bit. It shouldn't take you 10 minutes to do the things, but it's super duper easy regardless of what platform that you're using. I will note that if you're using MailChimp inside of GlockApps, there's another tool that you can use. It's literally like I pointed out in the video too, where you can just run the MailChimp test as well. So if you're using MailChimp, that's a little bit easier for you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we're going to talk all about your sender score and going through the process of being able to really see what is it, where are you at, and what can you do to improve it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pull this on over and share my screen. Let me know if you guys can't hear me or anything like that when I go to share my screen, because sometimes it does that. So show in screen. Okay. So you guys should be able to see my screen here. I'm actually going to take my face off here. So, then it'll stop my audio. Never mind. We can't do that. Okay. So this is your this is what I will have. Like, this is your report as opposed to when you go through the process of following that live Loom that I did for you. This is what's going to show up in your own way, in your own format, and all of the things. Okay. So as you can see here, in our live video that we did last week, we talked all about sender authentication. And so on the report, this is where you can see, and this is my own personal one, so you're going to see all of my stuff, but you're going to see here, so sender authentication, you can pull it open, and it gives you a little bit of details too. And the thing that I love about this is it gives you the information that you need in order to be able to either fix it or to verify. So if you have any questions, like very specific questions, if one of these turns up red, then you can easily go to your email marketing provider and say, hey, this is what GlockApps pulled for me. You can even share your GlockApps report. You can just hit the share button. I've had to do that before for some of my clients where I'm just like, hey, like this is coming up red and we need to fix this, right? All of those should be green. So if you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck? You can share this report with them and they can take a look at it and then be able to help you, which I know has been super duper helpful for some of my clients as well as they're going through the process of trying to figure out the things, right? Okay, so this is where you see your sender authentication. Now, here is a fun fact, right? Like here is a fun fact in terms of with all the things is that 83% of the time, the reason why your stuff goes to spam is literally because of the simple fact that something in this, like something within your email marketing is off. And more so specifically, it has to do with your sender score. It's crazy, right? Like 83% of the time, it has to do with your sender score. So here's the thing when it comes to your sender score that you need to know. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this one back up. So we're going to focus mainly on these two blocks right here. And I'm going to go into more detail about like, why is this red and why is this green? All of those things. So Your sender score essentially is 0 to 100, which is pretty simple to understand, right? Like you're either at 0 or you're at 100. Now the goal is obviously the higher the better. And so generally speaking, if it's usually about 60 or below, you're going to see it's going to be red. And that's where you're going to be like, oh my gosh, like we need to do something. So let's talk more so about like your sender score in terms of with like, okay, what does this actually mean? Your sender score is divided into two different parts. You have your IP, and then you also have your domain. Now, for your domain, that's where you take control, right? So your domain is going to be, so like for an example for me, my domain is ashleyk.deluca.com. So I technically have a sender score with my domain in terms of with that in particular. So within this overall score that GlockApps is giving me, this 97, my domain is part of that. So a lot of times what a lot of people think and end up doing is they're, if they're finding that a lot of their stuff is going to spam, they may run this GlockApp report and they'd be like, oh my gosh, my sender score is like super duper low and like everything's going to spam and da da da. And they're like, okay, we need to switch providers. The thing is it's not always the provider's fault. It may be your domain, because there's things that are linked to your domain that they're constantly taking a look at. They're going through the process of categorizing, and we're going to go into that in a second. But your domain is one part of it. And then the other part of it is going to be your IP address. So as you can see here, so on here, it says your server IP address 147 is found in the following blacklist, right? So like that IP address is the IP address that is linked with ConvertKit. So I use ConvertKit for my email marketing. I highly recommend them. But for the IP address that I'm currently on, I'm like that one that I currently use is on one particular blacklist. So let's open this up real quick. They have you see more about your sender score here. So we're going to click that and check that out real quick here so I can show you something. So this is also really neat too. You can always, if you know what your IP address or your domain, if like you want to check like specifically within that, you can literally do that within here. But basically you can see, okay, 96 for, this particular IP address, and you're going to be able to see all these additional stats and information and all that kind of good stuff. So if you're starting to see a ton of like red marks here, that's when you're like, oh my gosh, okay, something's going on with the IP address that like I'm on, because you can see as we scroll down, there's like 100 or 630 other people on this particular like IP address through ConvertKit, right? So if you're like, okay, so this is like super low, you can do two things. You can either go through the process of getting your own dedicated IP address, have it all set up and all of that. And that's a lot of work and very, 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 like, I don't think any of my clients have their own dedicated IP address because it's just not necessary. Rather, you can either do one of two things. You can go through the process of essentially reaching out to your email marketing provider and being like, hey, something's going on with this domain. So for an example, like I've reached out to ConvertKit and I'm like, hey, just so you know, this particular IP address that I'm currently on is currently showing on this blacklist. And I was like, hey, just so you know, because they can go through the process of requesting that that IP address being removed. They can go through that process for you. The other piece of it as well is, obviously because it's you have your IP address and you also have your domain. So the domain piece of it as well too, like when you look at that, that's all on you. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and pull this back open. So let's say you go through the process. So this is the IP address, right? So if we type in ashleyk.deluca.com, I've never done this before. So this will be really interesting to see. Okay, so it actually is like, what the heck? Okay, so it asks for the IP address, which is totally fine. But you can see here that I have my MX, SPF record, the SSL, all of that kind of good stuff within that, which goes into my sender authentication from last week. So all the pieces mixed together for you to be able to have like a really good, successful back end for your email marketing. So I'm just going to hop on over here. See if you have any questions, please let me know by all means. Just looking through my notes here, make sure I cover everything. Now, one other thing that I'll mention to you is that your sender score can definitely fluctuate. So the biggest thing that I want you guys to understand is that just like your credit score, how you can take certain actions in order to be able to raise it, you can also go through the process of doing something bad and lowering it. So the two biggest pieces that you need to make sure that you're paying attention to is going to be, how many spam complaints you're getting and then also the consistency of your email marketing. So I always recommend cleaning your list and getting rid of those email addresses that are just not interested in what you have to say, because the majority of time, they're going to eventually mark your stuff as spam. And that also counteracts your sender score, as opposed to going through the process of just cleaning them out. Then this is how you're going to end up with a much higher sender score, because you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this makes total sense. They're going to want to be on your list. So make sure you clean out your list regularly. I have a video inside of my Facebook group, Email Marketing Simplified, all about cleaning your list. So it's the process that I use in terms of like determining and figuring out how to do that. And then the second piece is going to be that consistency. So don't go through the process of getting on the email marketing bandwagon for 2 months and then dropping it, because that highly, highly, highly affects your sender score. So making sure that you go through the process of sending out regularly, whether you can commit to once a week or once a month, whatever that is, do it consistently. This is how you're going to be able to maintain or also up level your sender score, by going through that process. So it makes like a huge, huge difference as well too. Okay. So let me just see here if you guys have any questions or comments or all the good stuff. Okay, I'm just reading through here just to make sure all the good stuff. But, honestly, sender scores are so easy to manage when you're doing the right steps. And you also have, a really good provider that, ConvertKit is really good about going through and making sure that, they're not on any IP blacklist, and just making sure that your domain authority is up and going. So, yeah, so if you find, one other thing I'll mention too, is if you find that you are on a blacklist, like if your domain is on a blacklist, you can reach out to that list. So if you pull up here, let me share my screen again. So if you find that, so if this was to say your domain instead of your server's IP, what you can do is you can literally click on the link and say, okay, spam recently received. See, you can see all the things. So we'll just click on it. And so you can enter the code, you can check your entry. So let's do that. 6E4 DWR. Check entry. Let it load. Okay. And so you can go through and see, okay, is it a current historical? Okay, so this one here is historical. And this one is current. So let's see. It opens into it. So what you can do is you can actually contact us and reach out to them and put in a support ticket for this in order to go through the process. Or you can also click here that's an easier way, I guess, to delist an IP address. So that also helps too. So those are little things that you can do in terms of with being able to really get your sender score up and going. And also going through the process of just ensuring that, all of these little pieces are being taken care of. And that's why I really appreciate GlockApps, because it monitors all these things. And so if my sender score were to ever just totally tank for some reason, if I got like a ton of spam complaints, or I would send an email out to a bunch of dead email addresses, which is why you don't buy emails ever. Like, please do not buy emails, because that also will hurt you so terribly. Those are all pieces of the puzzle that you can use in order to be able to monitor, make sure you're good to go, and all of that good stuff. So that's why I highly recommend it. Okay. I'm just going to go back through here. I just want to make sure you guys don't have any questions before we hop off. But yeah, if you guys have any questions after, please feel free to just let me know. I'm definitely more than happy to answer any questions you guys have about your sender score. Or if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm confused from last week about sender authentication, please feel free to let me know as well too. Alrighty, perfect. Okay. Again, any questions, drop them down below in the comments. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And oh my gosh, I just appreciate you guys so much hanging out with me. So, all right, I will talk to you guys later. See ya.